Firstly, I want to welcome you all here tonight. Thank you so much for taking time on a weeknight. And even though it's sort of cold and windy and icy out there, I'm so pleased that you've taken the time to come tonight. It's an important event that you've come to. We're going to be sharing some very important information that has some real life benefits. And so I think you'll find this to be a very informative and interesting evening. This is me. I've been around in London for a long time. I started my career in London a long time ago, going to Fanshawe College after high school in a program that was called Creative Electronics. It was actually their music industry arts program, but it was just starting at that time, and that was actually its second year of operation. And at that time, I thought I would like to be a recording engineer, and I played guitar and I sang, and I thought that would be a great place to be. However, at that time, I felt the program was very disorganized, and so at Christmas time, I switched out of creative electronics and went into electronics, and did a 3-year program in control systems technology. I worked for a few years with computers and machines and photocopiers and all sorts of other equipment, and then I sort of thought, boy, you know, machines are sort of boring to work with. It would be so much more interesting to do something with people. So I started to look around to see what can I do that would sort of involve my interest in electronics and sound and music and people. And I'd never heard of an audiologist in my life before. I grew up in a small town west of here. Everybody I knew, and nobody knew, I've never been to an audiologist. I'd never heard what that was. But as I searched for a career, I found that, boy, there's a nice fit for me. I get to work with people. I get to help people hear better. It has to do with sound and perhaps music, and also my background in electronics. So I went back to university and did my undergraduate degree in the Communicative Disorders program, and did my Bachelor of Science degree, then went on to do my Master of Science degree in audiology, and that was back and finished that in about 1982. I started working at St. Joe's before I finished that in 1980, and then in 84 I decided that there must be a better way to provide audiological services. Back at that time, we were up on the 9th floor of the old building at St. Joseph's Hospital. It was difficult to get to for people. They had to park in that parking garage and come down and walk across and come up and find their way. And I thought, this can be done better. And so I left the hospital and opened up my office in Byron in November of 1984. So I've been doing this for a long time. And since then, we've opened several other offices. And back in 2008, I decided I would go back to school and did my Doctor of Audiology program. So after being out of school for a long time, I went back to school, and that was an interesting and challenging time for me, but I learned a great deal, and it kept my mind sharp. We're going to talk a little bit about that in what we talk about tonight. So that's a little bit of my background, and tonight we told you in the information that went out that we were going to talk about four objectives, things that you can do to try to delay or prevent or slow down the progression of dementia. And actually, it turns out I've got 5 of them that we're going to talk about tonight, but we'll certainly get those 4 and the 5th one out tonight. We're going to talk about some of the latest research that's out on dementia. Some very interesting research has come out in just the last few years. Some work from a fellow at Johns Hopkins in the US called Dr. Frank Lin. He's an otolaryngologist and a PhD. Has done a lot of work with looking at the development of dementia and how that relates to our hearing. So we're going to talk about his research. We're also going to talk about an article that came out in The Lancet. The Lancet is a British journal, came out just this summer, where they looked at a lot of different research papers and studies that had been done, and they sort of combined all that information and pulled out some of the pertinent information, and we're going to talk about that as well. So what the Lancet article said, the first thing is that symptoms of dementia occur later in life. But the underlying brain pathology develops many years earlier. And the point that they're making is the time to do something to slow down or prevent or delay dementia is early. Not late, but early in your life, in midlife. And they identified a number of potentially modifiable risk factors, things that we can actually do something about that have a good positive outcome on the development of dementia. And their research or their studies showed that more than a third of cases could be helped by doing these things. Those are the 5 things we're going to talk about tonight. So early in life, education. So one of the things that's strongly related to dementia is education. The more education you've had early in life, the less chance there is of developing dementia. And that's quite clear in all the research that's out there. Now, that's not a lot we can do about tonight. We can't go back to our childhood and get more education now. But that's certainly something to keep in mind, is that education is important. Keeping our mind active and engaged is important early in life and as we progress through life as well. Things that we can do at midlife where it makes a difference: hearing loss, hypertension, and obesity were all found out in the research that they did. And then later in life, smoking. Now, smoking can be a good thing to stop anytime. But the good thing about smoking is it has an effect whenever you do it. So the best time to stop smoking was never start. The best time was a long time ago, but it's never too late to stop smoking and have a positive benefit on the effects of that on the development and progression of dementia. Social isolation, and that's something that Susan talked about, and that's why they have a program to engage people, having them come out to social events. It's important. It keeps people engaged. It keeps people thinking and talking with other people. Those are important aspects for managing and controlling and delaying and preventing dementia. Depression, it's strongly associated with that. Physical inactivity, and I think, Susan, you also run programs for exercise things. It's important. And the research is very clear that being active is helpful with your brain health. And the other thing was diabetes. Those were the things that they picked out. And to give you, they drew a little graph about it, and that's probably very hard for you to read. So I split it up into two sections. This is the top part of that. And if you look over on those gray lines, I think I've got a pointer over here. Those are the things we can't do anything about. Those are your genetics. Those are the things you're born with. Those are just that's the body that God gave you. And we can't stop those things. But all these other lines here's the one about less education. So early education can have an effect of about 8% of the things that we can do something about are related to less education. And then down here in midlife, hearing loss, 9%, hypertension, 2%, obesity, 1%. And if we move on one more slide, late in life, stopping smoking, 5%, depression, physical inactivity, social isolation, and diabetes. So of the things we can't do anything about, there's about 65% that we can't do anything about. We have no option with that. We can't change our genetics at this point unless there's some gene therapy that comes along in the future. But at this point, we have what we have. But there are 35% of the potentially modifiable factors that lead to the development of dementia. We can do things about all of these ones. Hearing loss accounts for about 9% of that. So hearing loss, even early when we first start to develop it in our midlife, that's the time to do something about that. Smoking, 5%, depression, 4%, physical inactivity, 3%, and social isolation, 2%. When I was in school, way back in the late 70s, when I was doing my undergraduate and my master's degree, we knew that hearing loss led to things like social isolation, depression, paranoia, and reduced physical activity. Now, back then what we were taught was, well, when people don't hear very well, they stop doing things. They start withdrawing from social situations. They stop going to play bridge. They stop going to the exercise class or to the book club. So they become isolated. That's the social isolation. And often that can lead to depression. If your life is boring and you feel like you've got nothing to do, that's a depressing thing. And so depression can develop from that. And the same with paranoia. Sometimes people with significant hearing loss, they're afraid to answer the phone because they're afraid they might sign up for something that they don't know what they're doing. They often won't answer the phone. If the phone rings, they'll give it to their spouse. So they become worried that bad things are going to happen because they don't understand what people are saying. And reduced physical activity, again, they stop doing things. They stop going to exercise class. They stop engaging with the things that are important to keep active. So we knew that way back in the 70s that those were factors, that we knew that hearing loss led to those particular issues. What we didn't know was how important that was to things like dementia and cognitive decline. And here's the interesting numbers that come out right now if we look at this. Hearing loss accounts to about 9% of those factors, but hearing loss leads to depression, social isolation, and physical inactivity, another 9%. So of those 35% of things that we can do something about, 18 of them are things that have to do with our hearing. And so hearing is really important. It's in terms of things we can actually do something about, it's the biggest factor out there. Let's just move on from that to here. So up to about 18% of dementia cases could be eliminated, reduced, or delayed significantly by treating hearing loss early in midlife. Not when you're 80, but when you're 55. Starting early and keeping your hearing the way it is so you stay engaged and you stay active and you keep your mind engaged is important. So even treating mild hearing losses is strongly recommended now. In a few moments, I'm going to play a little clip of Dr. Lin speaking, Dr. Frank Lin from Johns Hopkins, and you'll hear him say exactly what I have just said there. One of the things that Dr. Lin's research has shown is that brains become smaller with age. That happens to everybody. Our brains shrink as we age. But people with hearing loss have an accelerated rate of shrinkage. And have done some very long-term research over 10 years where they took a group of people and at the beginning they assessed their hearing. They did MRIs to look at the size and shape of their brain, and they followed those people over 10 years. And what they saw was people with hearing impairment had significantly faster rates of loss of brain size, and particularly the area where the loss of brain tissue was in the areas that are important to hearing. And that makes some sense. If the hearing area is not being stimulated very well, it loses function. But interestingly, what their research shows also is that those same areas of the brain, which are sort of in the temporal lobe, and also has to do with memory and other cognitive functions that are strongly related to dementia and Alzheimer's. So then, of course, the question comes up, is the hearing loss the thing that's causing that? Or is a third thing causing both hearing loss and dementia? And that's where the research is still working on now, but the strong indication is that hearing loss plays a very significant role in the development of dementia and cognitive decline. Serious long-term consequences to brain functioning, and here's that's more of that part of the research where they looked at the changes in the brain that happen because of lack of stimulation from our hearing system. And the way I like to sort of describe this, when we talk about why is it that changes in our hearing can affect the way our brain is functioning, there are two things that are going on. One they call cognitive load. And let me describe it this way. When your hearing is great and is working the way it did when you were a young person, you don't think about language. People talk and you understand. It's not something you have to think about. It's easy. It takes no effort. As we begin to develop hearing loss, we have to start to work hard to understand what people are saying. So instead of just it happening automatically, we get a part of what they've said, and then we're looking at their facial cues. We're looking at did we just finish talking about, and making predictions about what are we likely to talk about next. And we're taking into effect things like, did a dog just walk past? Is it a sunny or cloudy day? You're pulling all these other factors in to help you make good guesses about what was likely said. That uses resources. Now you're thinking about everything that is said. So you're using up cognitive resources to help you understand language that you didn't have to do before. That extra load on our brain, on our cognitive resources, mean those resources aren't available for things like memory function and other cognitive functions that normally those areas of the brain were used for. And that's what Dr. Lin's research has shown. In the hearing area, there are also memory areas and other things like that. When more of our brain mental power is being used just to understand speech, it's not available for those other things. And it actually seems to be rewiring our brain in a sense, and we lose some of the functions that were there before. And you can sort of think about that with the visual system as well. When our eyes are working perfectly, you can read things and you can take in information. If you're visually challenged, like if I lose my glasses and I'm trying to read a menu at a restaurant, I've got to guess at what I'm reading. I sort of, okay, the appetizers, well, that likely says salad and some sort of salad, but you're having to work hard at figuring out what it is. That takes all my energy. If I'm doing that and someone's trying to talk to me, I probably will miss what they're saying because I'm so busy focused on trying to read the menu. It's the same with our hearing. When we're so focused on trying to understand what's said, we don't have our resources available for other things that are going on. This is what their research showed, is that people with a mild hearing loss were 2 times more likely to develop dementia, moderate hearing losses up to 3 times more likely, and severe losses up to 5 times more likely to develop dementia. So there's a very, very strong positive relationship between degree of hearing loss and the development of cognitive decline or dementia. The research is very, very strong on this issue. Here's what Dr. Lin had to say about it.
Hearing is a remarkable thing. It underlies almost everything we do every single day, our ability to engage with others, our ability to engage with the world around us. And yet, hearing loss, the loss of our ability to perceive and understand sounds, is incredibly common. We see that about 1 in 12 Americans has a significant hearing impairment, and this grows from about 1 in 1,000 kids being born with a significant hearing impairment to ultimately, as we age, that nearly two-thirds of all adults over 70 in the United States have a meaningful impairment that interferes with their daily lives. We're increasingly in research, we're seeing that hearing impairment, it increases our risk of developing dementia, it increases our risk of developing cognitive decline and loss of thinking and memory abilities over time, and even increase our risk of progressing to disability over time. And a lot of that has to do with just how integral hearing is to the brain. We're understanding that if you can't hear well, there's constantly a load put on your brain because you're constantly having to spend more energy to process this very, very degraded sound. At the same time, we're understanding that hearing loss may actually have a direct effect in terms of the brain structure, in terms of stability of the brain, how fast the brain shrinks and atrophies over time. So I think if any of you have any concerns about your hearing, or in particular loved ones' concerns about hearing, clearly the first step is just assessing it, to get a hearing assessment, a hearing evaluation, to find out whether it's even the case or not. And this is pretty simply done. Hearing tests are almost always covered by insurance, and it's something that can be done quickly in a 15 to 30 minute appointment that can set the stage for understanding what is going on with hearing and basically how it's impacting your life.
So, pretty much the same things that I had just finished telling you, but that's from Dr. Lin, the researcher at Johns Hopkins in the U.S. He mentioned it's almost always covered by insurance. That's in the U.S. Here, it's covered as well. So when we do a hearing assessment, there's no charge, and it's easy to do. It's something that everybody, what we're recommending to family physicians now is when your patients reach 50, send them to have a hearing assessment. It doesn't take long, and we can find out right then whether there's any hearing loss present. If there is, we can start the process of dealing with it. If there's not, that's great. But at least we know, and we can start taking the precautions early when we can have the most effect on the eventual outcomes that are going to come along. The other thing that's important in terms of having your hearing assessed is if you're at the point where there is some cognitive decline coming, or you're beginning to notice, or your family's noticing memory issues or other things going on, the first thing you want to do before you have an assessment of your cognitive function is make sure that you're hearing, because much of the assessment of your cognitive abilities is based on questions. Well, if you can't hear the question, you may not answer it right. And so we don't want to be misdiagnosing people as having issues with their cognitive function or memory if they're just not hearing the question in the first place. So it's really, really important that we make sure that hearing is addressed properly before those kinds of assessments are done. I was speaking with one of the facilities here in the city who does cognitive assessment, and that's not something they regularly do. And we're going to start doing that with his program because it's so important. We want to make sure that people are hearing when an assessment is done of their cognitive function. So it's very important. As I was saying, it's simple. It doesn't take long. There's no cost involved with having a hearing assessment done. And then we know what we're dealing with. And if your hearing is fine, we'll tell you that. If there's hearing loss beginning, then we can talk about what the right steps are in terms of treating that hearing loss that's there. There are some pretty amazing devices out there now that are simple to use. They're visually not in the way, In fact, probably none of you knew that I was wearing some hearing aids tonight, okay? They're on there because of this research and because I have some hearing damage that I did to my ears as a teenager when I thought I was going to be a record producer and I was in a band and I didn't know anything about hearing and protecting my hearing, and I caused some damage to my hearing back then. And they're small, they're unobtrusive, they're simple to wear, and they're easy to work with. And there's so much we can do with integrating them with your TV and with your telephone and with your family. They're amazing devices that we can use. We want to understand, we want to find out where you're at, and that's why that's very important that we do that. This is where a decision time sort of is, and anytime new information is given to people, there are three ways we can react to that. We can ignore it. I had one fellow tell me, he says, "Brian, I'm not in denial, I just don't believe you." I thought to myself, that's a great title for a book. I'm not in denial, I just don't believe you. This is a guy who does have some trouble with his hearing. His family notices it, they're telling him that, and we had a discussion about it, but that was his response. I'm not in denial, I just don't believe you. And so often with hearing loss, we tend to blame the world around us, and that's sort of what this next one goes to. You can alter your lifestyle to live with the hearing loss. And we all do this as hearing loss happens gradually. We start finding that, man, if people would just face me when I'm talking, I would hear them just fine. But it didn't used to be that way. Or you say things like, children these days, they just talk so fast, I can't understand what they're saying. Or teenagers mumble. The new TVs don't sound nearly as good as my old TV did. We come up with all these reasons, and I'm seeing some smiles and nods here, because you've noticed this in your own life. We do it automatically. We start modifying and adjusting the way that we live to try to accommodate the fact that we don't hear the way that we used to hear. And in fact, many people actually, they think they hear just fine. They don't think they're having trouble. They think it's the rest of the world that has changed. The rest of the world hasn't changed. The thing that has changed is our hearing. And it happens to everybody. We all lose hearing with age. Certain things can speed up that process, like noise exposure, like what I did to my ears. So people who've worked in industry or had loud hobbies or recreational activities, damage can be done to the ears. We can't undo that damage when it's done. But we tend to blame the rest of the world. We tend to think of all the reasons why we're not hearing, and it never has to do with us. But the short answer to that is it always has to do with us. Except for the rare occasion when you might run into somebody who's, as Seinfeld would say, a low talker. But most people talk in a way that most other people can understand them. If they didn't, nobody would talk to them. So the thing that has changed is not the rest of the world, it's your hearing. And it's a slow, gradual process. It's hard to remember, well, I don't remember what I heard 10 years ago, because today I think I hear just the same way I did yesterday. And because it's a slow, gradual process, it's hard to remember the way the world used to be. And that's where it can make a dramatic change when we fit appropriate hearing devices to people. I had one lady who had been after her husband for years to get something done because she was noticing that he was not hearing well. It was causing miscommunications at home. And eventually he did come in and we assessed his hearing, and he was in need, and we fit him with appropriate devices. And she came back at our 2-week follow-up and she said, "Brian, you've given me my husband back." And it was dramatic for her because all of a sudden she had somebody who she could converse with and carry on a conversation, which she had lost. It's amazing how we can withdraw. We stop going to family social events because we can't hear when we're there. We stop going to church because if you can't hear what the minister or priest is saying, it's not much interest in being there. So if you notice that you're modifying your life, if you're altering your lifestyle to get along with your hearing loss, then that's not a good thing. That's precisely the things that Dr. Lin's research showed, that social inactivity, physical inactivity, those are bad. Those are not good things for our brain health. So you don't want to let that happen to you. You can make a positive change. That's the third outcome that you can decide to say, yeah, I am having that trouble and I need to do something about it for the sake of me and my health, but also for the sake of the people around me. It's challenging for everybody when there's a communication breakdown. Doesn't matter whether you're the person that can't hear or the person that can't be heard. It's awkward for everybody. Messages get misinterpreted, dates get wrong, there's frequently asking for repetition. It gets very difficult to communicate all the way around. So it's challenging for everybody. So the easy thing and the best thing and the good thing for your health and the health of those around you is to decide to make a positive change. And where that starts is by having an assessment. And that's what we do. That's what I do. We provide assessments of people's hearing, and if there's hearing loss present, we will let you know what it is. If it's something that can be surgically or medically treated, then we'll make that referral back to your family doctor so that you can be referred on to that kind of a solution. If that's not an option, if the correct option is by using the right hearing devices, then that's what we'll present to you and prescribe and start the world off fresh with doing it that way. And if your hearing is normal, we'll tell you that. And we'll say, we'll see you in 5 years. But we want to keep on top of it. We're not going to just say, if you're 55 and we say, yeah, your hearing's fine, see you later. That won't be our response. It'll be, we'll check it in 5 years again. And we'll keep doing that regularly so that we can be on top of it. So when we see the first signs of difficulty with hearing, we can start to take activity then. Remember the research that Dr. Lin said is that the time to do it is for even mild hearing losses. When it's early, when you're in midlife, that's the time to start. But that doesn't mean it's not helpful to do it later in life as well. Just like smoking, it's better to have stopped a long time ago, but still stop now if you can. And the same with hearing. It's better to have done it when it first starts, but still correct to do it now and to keep the lines of communication working within your family and your social gatherings and the things that you do. So what I'd like to tell you tonight is I'm happy to see any of you for an assessment. I have some of our staff out front have our computer here, and we can make appointments for you today. And we'd be happy to do that. It doesn't take long. Takes about half an hour to do a proper assessment, and then we'll take some time discussing the results afterwards. And it's simple and easy to do. It doesn't cost you anything. And for you who are here, and some of you may be here because you're the person that is beginning to have some difficulties, or you may be here because of a spouse or a parent or a loved one. We'd be happy to see any and all of you and any of your friends or neighbors who maybe couldn't be out with us tonight. But please let them know we'd be happy to do that assessment. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I'm passionate about what I do. Everyone keeps saying, when are you going to retire, Brian? And I say, well, every year I say, I think I've got 10 more years left. And that's been going on for some time. I love what I do. It's thrilling to help somebody to hear better and to engage better with their family and their friends and keep them active and engaged. So I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it, and I know that we can help you just as we've helped hundreds of other people, thousands of other people in London. And in fact, some of you may be wondering, well, my mom's got Alzheimer's, and she puts her she always puts things in the wrong place, and we can never find them. What if she just loses the hearing aids? Well, that's a risk. But it's a small risk. We've fit many people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and there are ways to manage that things always get put in a certain spot at night, depending on their living arrangements, with whether they have support staff that work with them or whether they're living with a family member. There are ways to handle that, and the benefits far outweigh the possible negative side effects of things happening. I had a lady, actually he was a guy once, and he had a habit of, when he took his hearing aids off at night, putting them in his denture water cup instead of his dentures. So his hearing aids got broken quite frequently. But you know what? They can be repaired. And the benefits far outweighed those times when we had to repair his hearing aid because it got dunked in with his dentures. Things like that happen, and we understand that. We know how to work with people that are cognitively impaired. We've done that for many, many years. We're patient. We take the time to explain things. That's the other thing. People say, well, Mom could never figure out how to work these. They're too complicated. Hearing aids are not complicated, or they don't need to be. They can be as complicated or uncomplicated as we make them. And for people who have limited dexterity or limited cognitive capabilities, we can use devices that are simple and easy to use, that they just have to be put in. And whether they're put in by them or by someone who's working and helping them, it's simple to do. We can simply show you how to troubleshoot them to make sure that they're working. It's all stuff that we've done 100 times, and we know exactly how to do, and we can help you just like we've helped thousands of others.